to be educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my loneliness. I guess that ignorance is bliss. Take me back to
This is Parkstone at Home, a space where we chat all things property, home and life. I'm Hayley Jackman, Digital Content Director, and I am joined each episode by Elizabeth Jackson, owner and operator of Parkstone Property.
I wish I knew.
So this is the first ever episode of our podcast. I'm super excited to be here. Obviously, we're going to be a little bit nervous at first. We've never done this before, but we're just going to dive right in and have a good chat. So my name is Hayley, and I am the content creator and digital marketing, person at Pine City Properties, or the Holistic Property Group, which encompasses yourself and a bunch of other people as well. And so I guess I'm the person who does all this stuff. And then I am joined by the absolutely fabulous Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Hello. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're sitting in the chair today?
Where to start? I have been in property management for over 2 decades, starting in Tasmania and then working up the east coast of Australia to landing in Mackay, and I've worked at a few agencies there, tried to get out of the industry, and then it sucked me straight back in again. It's part of who I am, I suppose. And when the opportunity came up to start my own agency at Parkstone Property, I jumped at it because those opportunities don't come up very often. So for me, property management, or why I started Parkstone Property, was to help people. I've found over the years working with different agencies that it was a little bit either tenant-focused or owner-focused, and I pride myself on sitting on the fence and being Switzerland and providing or interpreting the legislation for both owners and tenants so that we can be transparent and come to an amicable agreement when there's any disagreements about anything. And I felt that media portrays property managers in a really bad light, and that
definitely,
we're not actually that bad. we are kind of like a meat in the sandwich between an owner and a tenant. So that's where that communication is really, really important between both parties. So that's why I created Parkstone Property, to create or to help investors to have to be a smooth process when they purchase a property, that I am also there to help build that. So it's not just a short-term solution, it's a long game, and helping increase that value of the property through rent and also preventative maintenance on the property as well. And that's basically where it derived from. And with the backing and support of Jeff and the Holistic Group, he saw a lot of potential in me that I perhaps didn't see at the time. But as we've grown since March, it's become very exciting to where this can go.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's awesome. I guess I also wanted to build on that and just chat about why we're also sitting here doing the podcast, because I think that really comes from what you were talking about of why Parkstone really exists in the first place.
Yep.
And I think in our conversations, we were, with me as the marketing executive for a whole lot of different people, everyone I sort of speak to wants to do their marketing in a bit of a different direction and put their message out there in a different way. And for a lot of people, that was sort of TikTok videos. Obviously that format is fantastic at the moment. Everyone loves them. But for us, I think I've been really interested in our conversations because, you specifically have always really wanted to educate people in a way that just kind of tries to remove that gatekeeping away from the property sector.
Very
There's
much
so much that people don't know about what they're doing, and I think a lot of people feel that part of that bad reputation with property managers is that they do sketchy things or they want to keep quiet what happens in their offices. And so I think that's been a really awesome development working with you, is that we're trying to put this stuff out there And that was maybe some informational videos, but I think that we've ended up here with a podcast, and I think it's a really great way to do that because we can actually talk just really informally and like get the questions answered and go back and forth and have that more interaction with the community as well, is what I hope for this to be.
Yeah, 100%.
And yeah, so I think I'm hoping that with this podcast we're able to do that and we're able to answer people's questions and just go through some things that people might not know about. So, I mean, I suppose that's the position that I act in the podcast as well. So I'm on the marketing side of things. I don't really know much about property management or real estate, despite being in the industry now. I'm learning a lot as I go, but it's not something I really know about. So I will definitely be learning a lot here across from you, and I'll be able to give that perspective of just a complete newbie, novice, who doesn't really know anything. And so I guess if we wanted to dive right in, I think something that's really on people's minds at the moment is this idea that we're in a bit of a housing crisis. So you've seen those words in the news everywhere, that we're in a housing crisis where there's lots of problems with property at the moment, especially for renters. I guess I wanted to ask, like, what's your perspective on, you know, whether or not we are in a housing crisis, where that might have come from, this idea, and just kind of generally what's happening in the market right now?
Yeah, in Queensland it's really tough. Because there's been a massive increase in property values, interest rates, everything all comes together and creates this problem that we have, which is lack of housing. So, but then on the flip side of that too, we've got the affordability crisis. Because there's lack of housing, then we have the prices go up, which means then most people that sit in what used to be a couple of years ago, the average, well, I know in Mackay, the average rent per week was about $450, $500 for, you know, maybe $550 for a 4, 2 and 2. So 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom and double garage. Doesn't necessarily mean it was fully air-conned, but that was pretty much a standard price per week. Now that's increased because there's lack of those properties. It's now increased to maybe another $150 to $200 a week, which means those that used to be able to afford that are now unable to afford perhaps $600 a week for the same kind of property. And with wages not increasing, it then looks more like an affordability crisis. Because of the increase in interest rates and because the market prices have gone up for sale properties, investors are getting out of the investor market. And unfortunately, there's been changes in legislation by the current government, which actually don't make it, there's no real incentive for an investor to get back in unless they have a good property manager who's able to navigate all of those changes and assist the owner in that sense. So unfortunately then tenants who are in the renting market have discovered or are experiencing dramatic increases in their rent to match the market, which whilst I totally understand, and I'm a renter too, so I had a rent increase as well. So I've suffered that too. You are able to counter offer if you get a rent increase. You can go back and say, I don't want to pay that amount. Would the owner accept this amount?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, which is everything is negotiable, which is one thing that I've discovered with a lot of tenants as well when they've been looking and their applications come through. You can go back and negotiate with the owner. The owner can say no, but you've got a 50-50 chance, either yes or no. So you never know if you never ask.
That's true.
Rather than just accepting, say, $100 rent increase, you might be able to negotiate it to be $50. But the owners, at the end of the day, it's a business transaction for them. So they have increases in their insurance, especially in Mackay, which is the area that I predominantly work in. We are in a cyclone and flood-prone area on the maps. We haven't really had a flood there for many, many years, but we've been branded that. So all the insurance agencies like to hit us with that, which means the owner's premiums are a lot higher compared to somewhere else. So they've got a lot of costs associated with owning an investment property. So not only insurances, they've got landlord's insurance, they've got the rates notices, which Mackay is pretty expensive come rates time, and they're every 6 months. So they've got a lot, plus the maintenance on top of that of the properties. So the tenants need to take into consideration that this is a business transaction for the owner. They're not all greedy owners. They are purely people, just like you and I, who are looking at ways to make their retirement or their money work better for them. And kudos to them. It's not something that the faint-hearted take on usually, but if you've got an opportunity to buy an investment property, then why not? But again, it comes back to having that property manager who can see the benefits, or if there's a way of doing that preventative maintenance, which means maintenance down the track is lesser cost and less, instead of just leaving something and then fixing it when it's broken. Sometimes that can be more expensive. But in terms of the housing crisis, I think it's more affordability and perhaps a housing crisis. But I mean, having said that, these properties that come on the market that investors are selling, it's an opportunity for first home buyers to get into the market. So it's not all doom and gloom. There are renters that are getting out of the renting cycle and are able to buy their first homes because they were able to rent when the prices were a little bit lower. They were able to save. So that's a bonus, that they're able to get out of that cycle and buy their own. And then they suddenly realise, there's all these other costs, and this is why the owner was increasing our rent.
Yes.
So it kind of comes full circle in that sense. But I don't see things slowing down, especially in Mackay. We have got so much going on infrastructure-wise, manufacturing and the mines. We kind of are in a little bubble in Mackay. Mining, I'm seeing so many applications of people relocating to the area. And with that growth comes more teachers that need to come to Mackay for the schools because people move with their families. So it's got a massive domino effect. And I feel that, it's going to keep going and it may plateau, but I don't see it slowing down, which is great for my owners, but not so great for the tenants, because I am seeing a lot of applications coming through, and unfortunately I've only got perhaps one house at a time and only one application can be successful. And I might get 10 or 15 per property, and going through those and thoroughly processing them. Unfortunately, some people move out. And they ring and ask, what was wrong with my application? And I explain there's nothing physically wrong with it. It's just you are in competition with other people. And it saddens me that I don't have 15 houses to rent to 15 different people. It would be I would love that. So, but it doesn't always work that way. So,
but perhaps hopefully with that growth in Mackay that we're seeing, that you might be able to get that rent roll to be bigger and bigger, and then be able to fill those houses with these tenants that want.
The rent roll growth is organic. Maybe down the track I could grow bigger and buy a rent roll, but at this stage it's just organic growth. So then I have control over the quality of the properties I'm bringing in, and I can really qualify the owners that I work with, that they are on the same page as me about looking at the ways to grow their rental yield on the properties, and preventative maintenance, and they may be able to, in a couple of years' time, use equity in that property to buy another one, which is great for them, and it also means great for the rental market because there's potentially another property that's on the market for rent.
Okay, so there's definitely a benefit to kind of being a little bit more choosy when it comes to your organic rent roll, and being able to really pick and choose kind of.
Yeah.
Well, not turn people away, but perhaps ensure that if owners are coming to you, that they can know that their investment will actually be grown in a really efficient way.
So property management is not just about collecting rent and reacting when there's maintenance. It is about looking after that investment for your owner. And that's especially for me. So I look at it as a long term. I'm in this for the long haul with you. I want to make sure that property is in its best condition and is also getting the best rental price per week. So I can be a little bit more ambitious than most agents in Mackay, because, again, if you don't ask, you don't know. And it's easier to start higher. And then, so with advertising, I always start a little bit higher, because if I don't get any inquiry after 48 hours, I know that it's too high and then I can bring it back. And rather than if we put it on at just a safe price, yes, we can rent it at that, but really is it worth that much per week? Because at the end of the day, the owner should get as much rent as they can for that property. I know that's a controversial opinion, but my job at the end of the day, I'm paid by my owners, and that is to get the best rent per week. And so I'm going to try. And if I can't get it, I always come back down.
Yeah.
And because there's
it would be a tricky balance.
It is really tricky, and I am probably one of the most expensive per week when I advertise properties. My owners aren't complaining about that, and I totally understand from an affordability point of view. There's perhaps a lot of people that don't look at my properties, but at the end of the day, if the rent is what the rent is, it's up to you. If you can't afford it, I totally understand that, but those that can, if they need a property, that's just generally the price that it is per week. And it is set then for 12 months. There's no increases in that 12-month period because legislation changed that we can only increase rent every 12 months.
Yes, I heard about that.
Yeah, and that's on the property, that's not on the tenant. So if you change tenant 6 times in that 12 months, the rent cannot change. So there's those limitations for investors now with the legislation changes, hence why a lot of them got out of the market because they perhaps hadn't had good management to help navigate all of that. There was a lot of scaremongering in the media about that and misinformed or misinformation, and it was detrimental. There was a lot of owners that decided to get out that had enough.
I suppose, I guess in the media, at least something I've noticed, just as like majorly a tenant who knows nothing about being an owner, it's so much of what the media is saying right now is that, everything's terrible for tenants and no one cares about tenants and, the prices are just going up and it's so much harder for everyone to find a house. And I think like part of that is true. There's obviously a reason. There's a reason to be upset and a bit panicked for these people for all those reasons that you gave before. But I guess also like coming back to what you were saying about how your properties are often a little bit more on the expensive side, like I think someone could easily sort of hear that and be like, oh, well, it's because she doesn't care about tenants. But if we think about it more, it's you're being very choosy about the owners you get in as well, and you're the one trying to maintain the investment, and part of that is making sure they do those preventative maintenance.
Correct.
And the other part of that is making sure that you're really communicative as well. So like, a lot of the issues for tenants isn't just that the prices are high; it's also that their real estate agency never talks to them, they don't hear from them, they have maintenance that never gets done. Nobody seems to care about them on that side of things. But then at least if they went with an agency like Parkstone, who's a bit smaller, then they know that, okay, I know that they're going to talk to me, I know they're going to communicate, I know that my maintenance is going to get done if it even needs to happen because they've already prevented it. Yeah. And so that they know that if they get into this property, they manage to be competitive and get in, they know that they're in a place that they can be in for the long haul. Oh, correct. Because it's protected really by you as the property manager.
I suppose too, looking at it from another perspective is that if it is a little bit more per week, there is a higher standard with that property. Yep. So to expect as a tenant, and it is just across the board, the rents are higher. So the expectation from tenants is I'm paying $600 a week now for something that was perhaps $400. I have a expectation of turnaround time for something to be repaired, and I totally understand that. I'm the same, especially in the property that I rent. There is a level of expectation, but aside from that too, like we have to wait in line for tradespeople, which is beyond our control. All the aircon technicians are pretty much flogged in the summer season.
I suppose in Mackay, absolutely, you'd see that.
So I definitely agree. Communication is a huge part of property management, and everything if it doesn't exist in writing, it doesn't exist. But it also means too, there's other ways to communicate. It's not just via email. There's text messages. If there's a phone call, I will always follow up with an email of what we discussed. And the same with the owners. I text them about something and say, hey, I've just sent you an email about maintenance. Can you reply? So then I can get on top of it. A lot of my owners, though, we have a mutual understanding. If it's something really small, like if it's tap washers or something like that, just get a plumber there to fix it rather than and I just send an email just confirming, hey, tenant reported this. They've got a few plumbing issues, so I try and collate everything together so the plumber's there on one call out to do various different things rather than goes out 1 week, fixes a leaking tap. 2 weeks later, he's there because the shower head's leaking. It's accumulating everything together, which is more cost effective for the plumber too, because otherwise he's just going backwards and forwards.
Yeah, and I suppose it's better for the tenant too, because then they can just expect one visit.
That's right.
And know things are going to be fixed, and they don't have to keep getting entry notices
all the
this
time
stuff.
and having random tradespeople coming through all the time.
Yep.
There were legislation changes in relation to expected time frames for certain maintenance to be completed by.
Okay.
Which sometimes when legislation is changed, it's not always realistic, especially when it comes to things like air conditioners. As I said before, those aircon techs are absolutely, they're so busy in the lead up to summer.
Yep.
We get a lot of our owners to do preventative maintenance in the winter months, so that when the tenant turns on the air cons, they're good to go.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, sometimes surprises happen, but if we do that preventative maintenance, then there's less chance of something happening when they turn it on if you don't touch them for all of winter.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think too, throughout my whole process with applications, I'm always updating statuses, and I know a lot of other agencies in town, they are so busy and they have large rent rolls. They don't necessarily have a leasing team dedicated to just processing applications or showing houses. So I can understand that they may not get back to a lot of inquiries that come in. The beauty of being a boutique, smaller agency is that I do all of that. So and for me, any inquiry is a potential tenant. So I look at that and go, okay, because if I was inquiring on something and I didn't hear back for 3 days, it's like, oh, little red flag. What are they going to be like when they actually manage the property? So both an owner and a tenant see that's a little red flag in terms of communication.
Because I know when I live with my real estate for my property, if I have to call up about something, I'll always get through to a receptionist. And I used to be a receptionist a long time ago when I was really, really young for a real estate agency. I probably did a bit more than what I was supposed to be doing, but I would answer their questions and things like that.
Yeah.
But when I call up my receptionist, they'll be like, it doesn't matter what I say. They'll be like, cool, awesome, I'll write a note for the agent. And then I won't hear back for probably a week or so. And I'm just like, I don't know if he's read it or what it might be. So.
And that's the thing, isn't it? I know when I send an email, I don't know if it's got to them. Yeah. If they don't respond, generally like I'll respond to an email the same day that it's sent to just say, hey, I've got your email, I'm onto it, I've spoken to the owner, I'm just waiting for their instructions. At least then the tenant knows, one, you've received it and you're actioning it, and two, you're just waiting for the owner. And then they can sit back and they go, okay, Elizabeth's got it, she's all over it. And then when I do actually get instructions from the owner, I send another email saying, this is the tradesperson that's been engaged. They will contact you direct to arrange access to come and sort it out for you. It's probably over-communicating in some ways, but at least there is a paper trail for everything. Yes. And if a tenant having that issue of you're waiting weeks and weeks perhaps to hear back in relation to something that has been reported, can't have that.
Yeah.
I can't stand sitting and waiting. I just want to know. And it's just a quick little email to say, hey, yeah, I got it. And I'm onto it. Just bear with me. The owner might be overseas, so they're getting back, and I'll find out, as soon as I know, I'll let you know. So at least then the tenant understands, Elizabeth's all over it.
I think that's important now too, because I think maybe like way back when people weren't super techie, and so they didn't expect instant responses to things. But I know definitely with my generation who are renters mostly now, it's mostly people my age, which is 20 to 25. We are so used to this idea of being left on red and how that's awful and how we expect everyone to sort of be at our beck and call at any given second. And so for us to not hear back, I feel like we feel it a lot more than someone older might, because we just have that expectation of people. Yeah. And just we're like, oh, we've been left on red. And it just makes us really kind of antsy and not happy. So I think you'll probably see that even more, is that tenants need that extra communication to feel cared for.
Oh, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Especially with text messages. I
Yes.
sometimes get text messages after hours and it's just a simple reply, hey, I'll get onto that for you first thing tomorrow. So for me, working for myself, I need to have those clear boundaries with my owners and my tenants. Otherwise, there is a level of expectation of if I do it once, I'm setting a precedent that I'll always be contactable and available at any time of the day, which is not okay. I need to have time where I can shut off and spend time with my children. So if I do get a text message from a tenant, oh, hey, this has gone wrong, I'll say, cool, can you send me an email tomorrow? And I will attend to that tomorrow for you, especially if it's outside of business hours. Sometimes owners are a little bit different depending where they are located. And now we have daylight saving with the rest of Australia or parts of Australia. Bone of contention that Queensland doesn't have it. But that becomes a little bit more of an area that, I got your text message, cool, thank you. Or if it's something quick and easy, I might just take a phone call. But setting the boundaries is really important. I don't like sending emails to tenants of anything of great importance after, say, 4:30 of an afternoon, because once they get it, they want to talk about it.
Yep.
And I like to talk to them before I send it, especially if it's something to do with a vacate inspection, to explain anything. And having a phone call before you send an email like that really softens the blow of those emails, because you're talking about something at a high emotional time where they're very stressed because they've just moved. They want their bond back straight away. And I have different office policies in relation to that. So having that conversation and just explaining to them, this is just my office policy. Yes, I have made a claim on your bond because you broke your lease. That's why I can't you can't have your bond back straight away, because there's a few other moving parts that we need to sort first. But having that discussion, hearing a voice, they understand.
Yep.
And I explain it rather than just sending an email with no emotion.
Yep.
Sometimes
There's automated emails too.
Yeah.
I've gotten those before after a routine, and I receive it and they'll be like, you need to fix this, or, we'll send a notice
to remedy
to leave.
breach. Yeah.
And notice to remedy breach, or you'll be kicked out and all this stuff. And I'm like, it's just a stain. I'm
Or it's
panicking
just-
now. And then I'll call them and they'll be like, oh, it's just automated. It's okay.
Yeah,
Just don't worry about it. And I'm like, I was panicking.
But in some ways, those automated, yes, I can understand on a greater, if you've got a really large rent roll, there are automated emails.
It does make sense, yeah.
But they can be customised before they get sent, because they've customised it because they've written what's the issue on it.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like some agencies or some property managers may use that as a, dare I say it, I'm probably going to be crucified for it, but as a bit of a power trip to create a sense of urgency to get something done quickly. Whereas I'm a little bit different. I always send a thank you email after I've done a routine inspection to say thank you for allowing access, because I'm entering your home.
Yeah.
Yes, I manage it and it's owned by somebody else, but it's still your home. It's your belongings. You're creating the vibe in your house, so it's your home. I'm entering your space, and it is a very fine line when you walk into someone's house. You're not there to judge how they're living, it's making sure that the property is being maintained. So if there's things like ceiling fans have got a little bit of dust on them, I might say, look, next time when I come round, you just need to attend to your ceiling fans. And it's not a, if you don't do it in a week's time, I'm going to send you a notice to remedy breach.
You're out.
Because sometimes I think that is way too harsh for what it is.
It feels harsh.
It's really blunt.
Yes.
And I don't know that it's, okay, if your lawns are 6 foot high, probably, but it might be a phone call of, hey, I'm at your house. Has your lawnmower broken or something like that? Like, why are they so long? So sometimes there's a reason why something hasn't been attended to. And so it's like the saying, everybody's got something going on. And we just have to be kind. So I always go with that approach with anything, especially when it comes to tenants, because I don't know what's going on then in their life. They might have a parent that's really ill and the last thing on their mind is cleaning the ceiling fan blades. Or it might be, there's, I don't know, the toilet's not clean or something like that. So I always approach things a little bit differently of how I would like to be treated if something was going on. And I mean, I don't need to know what's going on in every tenant's life, but just having that kindness of, hey, is everything okay? It's like with rent arrears. If a tenant who's constantly paying in front and then something happens and they're not, to me it'll be a response of, hey, is everything okay? I've noticed that you're just a couple of days behind. Is everything all right in your world? Because if everything in the previous months has been perfect, something's upset the apple cart.
It can't just be random.
No. And it might have been, they went on holiday and they forgot about their rent, in which case it's like, cool, no problems. Can you just fix that up? Because it will show on your ledger. And again, that's one thing that I've noticed with applications as well. A lot of tenants don't necessarily understand that they're behind in their rent. They pay
because it's
it
by day, right? I never understood that for so long, and I rented since I was 18. And not until I worked in real estate did I understand that it's by day.
Yeah.
And so you could pay ahead and then they'd still text you the next week and say, you're behind.
Yeah.
I'm like, how?
Yeah.
But it's because you have to calculate how many days behind.
Correct.
And then catch up like that. And
Correct,
obviously property managers have like a program that can do that for them and tell you exactly how much.
Yes.
But we have to do the math, I
Yeah,
suppose.
yeah.
And I imagine a lot of tenants would get
I
confused.
suppose that's where it comes in education for you, the tenant, when they move in. So when a tenant moves in with me, I get them, I use a third-party program that is like a direct debit system, similar to what you would set up yourself with your own bank account into a trust account.
Yep.
This is just using a third party, but I also offer the trust account because we have to now with the legislation changes. But I always recommend to tenants, once you've moved in and you've been there a week, set it up for that week. So then you're constantly paying ahead because the legislation states you've got to be ahead. You can't, it's a grey area. But for any tenant, in theory, when you give notice, your 2 weeks notice, recommends that you are 2 weeks ahead so that when you do give that notice, technically you don't have to pay rent because it should be 2 weeks. You should be 2 weeks ahead.
Right.
But now with legislation changes, it's paying in advance, but we can't use the words in advance anymore. It's very specific.
Oh. Why is that? Did you know?
I don't know. I find it really frustrating. Like a tenant could pay the daily rate every day for the next day if they wanted to.
That's so chaotic.
It would be chaotic and it would
stressful.
be painful for a receipting side of everything.
Yep.
But so I just recommend to tenants, look, you pay your first 2 weeks when you first move into the property. Pay weekly from the first week thereafter. Yep. And then you're constantly keeping yourself ahead because once you fall behind, it is really hard to catch back up again.
Yeah.
We understand before even cost of living was increasing, it was just hard because, things come up all the time. And we're coming into the crazy part of the year of Christmas, New Year, like kids are on school holidays, so they're at home eating all the food, so you're buying groceries a lot more.
Yep.
So keeping yourself ahead so that you do give yourself that little bit of grace period if there is a hiccup and something happens and you're still ahead, but it's not like you are paying week to week. It is... and you're only paying up to date at that point. You've still got leeway. Ultimately, it's up to the tenant however they want to pay.
That's true.
It's just when your rent is due, you should be paying it or it should be received by the real estate by the day before. So if your rent is always due on a Thursday, you should have it going into the trust account or to the agency on the Wednesday.
Yep.
So that because on your ledger, it will show what date it was receipted and what period it pays for. So if I get a ledger from an applicant and it shows, and some CRM systems or some programs show how many days in arrears constantly it is on the right-hand side. So if I get a ledger and they're constantly 9, 11 days behind, I question it and I ask the applicant, what's happened there? And I can generally go back through their ledger and see where there's been a hiccup. It may have been they paid their rent increase a week too late, or it could be that they missed a week for some reason and they don't have that leeway anymore. That, unfortunately, doesn't bode well for that applicant. If there's extenuating circumstances, I can understand that. But my job as a property manager is to relay all of that to the owner And then the owner has the final say. It's not up to me, per se. So with the third-party system that I use, it kind of eradicates any issue of that happening, because like with any normal direct debit from a bank account, there's dishonour fees if a payment doesn't go through. Same thing with the third party. They're there as a deterrent to make sure that you've got money in your bank account before that debit comes out. But it's unfortunately, I get a lot of responses of, I didn't know that I was behind, which I can understand, but we as an agency have to provide a rental receipt to you electronically every time we receipt your rent. So there is an onus of proof for you as a tenant to check that. And if it shows that your rent that you just paid pays you only up to 3 days ago, it's constantly going to be an issue for you, and you will get knocked back, especially in markets like now. Agencies are looking at tenants or applications that are ahead, or they have no issues with their rent, because the owner needs to cover their costs and they get dispersed mid-monthly and at the end of the month. And if there's not enough money there, they've got to pitch in their own cash to make sure their mortgage payments are met. So that's really important then, to make sure the rent is paid so that the owner's getting the right amount of money every fortnight. So in theory, it should be 2 weeks. Gets paid to the owner every fortnight because there's,
2 weeks of rent.
So, but sometimes it doesn't work that way, which, then the owners, if it's a one-off, the owners can understand. But if it's a constant battle, that could be a reason why your lease is not renewed, especially if there's been communication to try and rectify the situation and it's fallen on deaf ears, as in the email's been sent and it's been delivered to a tenant's inbox. They choose not to do anything about it. That is really frustrating for a property manager, because we're trying to help you so that you can fix it. But if you choose not to do anything about it, we can't force you to do it.
No.
So
I suppose from that tenant perspective, in a sense of being competitive, but also just making sure that you, I guess, don't get blacklisted, if that's still a thing, is making sure that you pay that 2 weeks in advance.
Correct,
Up front. Pay that 2 weeks and then pay weekly after that.
Yeah, definitely.
And, I guess that's easy to say, and then things might accidentally happen, I suppose. Yeah.
But that's where having that little bit of leeway there of that extra week helps. And at the end of the day, your property manager is a human as well. So hopefully they have empathy and they understand if something happens.
Hopefully.
But, we're all human, so each to their own. But, if there is something that's happened and it's in your world it's catastrophic and you can't for some reason make a rental payment, let your property manager know. And then they can let the owner know that there's a little hiccup on your end, you're going to fix it, because you're better off to be upfront rather than be behind the 8 ball in 2 weeks' time when potentially you're up for a notice to remedy breach for non-payment of rent.
And then you start talking about why not.
Yeah.
I could have told them that weeks ago.
Correct, yeah.
And I guess, that's always a good reflection just from a human point of view when it comes to leadership or at school or anything like that. As if you be upfront with someone, they usually respect you so much more for that.
Definitely.
Even if the reason might not be the best, if you're upfront and honest.
Yes.
They'll be so much more easy about it.
That's right.
They communicated that. I respect them for that.
That's right. So it's one of those things. Tenants are expecting communication and their property managers to be responsive all the time.
Yep.
It's got to be returned as well. It's got to be reciprocal. So if you want us to liaise with you all the time, let us know if something's going wrong in your world. So then we can know as well. It's easier. Yeah. It's like I had this conversation with my son the other day because he got in trouble at school. Oh, no. And I said to him, buddy, you're better off to tell mum and dad if something happens as soon as you get in the car, because if you don't tell us, we're going to get a text message from school. Yep. We're going to be really shocked and surprised, and then we're going to come and ask you about it. So please tell us everything, even though you know you're going to get in trouble. At least if you're in front of the 8 ball, we will respect you because you've had the guts to say, Mum and Dad, I got in trouble at school, you're going to get a text message. Yeah. And this is what happened.
And I think actually, to go off property even just for a second, I think for me at least, that's such a cornerstone of, I guess, being a good person, and maybe not a good person, it's sort of bad choice of words, but just sort of trying to be the best person you can be.
Yeah.
One of the major things about that is accountability.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And yeah, I don't think people talk about that enough, but it's about owning everything and taking your responsibility for all your choices.
Definitely,
that you make. And yeah, part of that is being ahead and thinking about your choices and then making it and then saying, yes, I made that choice.
Yeah.
I'm acknowledging that.
Definitely.
If it was a mistake, you say, look, that was a mistake. I'm sorry. How can I fix it?
Yeah.
And then you move on and you learn and you try to be better.
Yeah.
And so that applies to just everything, right?
It does,
and so
it does, yeah.
Of course, it would have application in this world as well. But obviously, like we were saying way earlier, there's just this conflict almost between tenants and property managers, and especially tenants and landlords. People, there's such a negative perspective on it. And so I think a lot of tenants will sort of think, well, I would do that in my everyday life, but when it comes to my real estate and my landlord, they're all a bunch of jerks anyway, so why should I, they don't talk to me anyway, so I don't care about, They
don't tell us all the information, or they deliberately didn't tell the owner about my aircon because they don't like me, when really there's so much that goes on in the background when it comes to property management. Whilst when we talk to you like you're the only person in the world, but in the background, we are juggling 15 different balls in the air at any one time. That is one thing. I tried to step away from property management, and I was really bored. I was so bored because I realised I'm high functioning. I need to have a gazillion things on the go for me to feel sane. So it's probably not something I should be saying about myself, but I like high energy. I like to be constantly stressed almost.
Sounds like that you're just good for this industry, really.
Yeah. I think too, starting at it from a very young age out of college and not going to uni, I fell into it. And then working in the property management department, I really enjoyed the high energy. No day is the same. And kind of like the police force or something like that. And there's such a variety during your day, and you're talking to all different people. One day you might have a hot water cylinder that's leaking, or you might have a gas, loss of gas, hot water, or someone's back door isn't locking anymore for some reason. So it's all these random different things. But at the end of the day, I'm a bit of a problem solver for everybody. I come in, I fix it and sort it for you. And so that brings me a lot of joy that I can fix something for someone, but with empathy and kindness associated with that. So in terms of applicants now, and it's hard to stand out because there's so many applications. And if there are issues like rent arrears on your application, in your bios on, say, To Apply or Ignite, you can say a little bit about yourself, and, you can send pictures of your pets, and which I strongly recommend because it builds that emotional bond. Yep. If the owners love animals, they'll see your pet and go, oh, my God, that's such a cute little dog. And, your dog likes to do this or your cat likes to do that. It just builds a relationship or rapport with the animal already. But in that bio, right in there, we know there's arrears on our ledger. It's because of X, Y, Z. Some agencies may look at that as, it's just an excuse. But for me, how I interpret that is, you're telling me up front. So respect.
Yep.
Then I'm not going to get a huge surprise when I see your ledger and go, oh, your application looks really good, but you've just got this issue on your ledger. What happened? Being in front of the 8 ball with that, being up front, huge respect for that. But sometimes tenants don't know, in which case then we have a conversation, especially if everything else looks great. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people that have had issues in the past with their tenancies and their application doesn't look that great because of arrears. Even if you do fall behind, always look at an option of a payment plan, which might be you pay a week's rent plus an extra $20 per week. Just that will add up over time, and it also shows that you are trying to get rid of that because not everybody has got another week just to pay outright.
No.
Especially if something's upset the apple cart 3 months ago. It's a slow process, but it at least shows goodwill that you are wanting to do the right thing, and it shows the owner that you are prepared to pay just that little bit extra to help try and clear it. It might take 26 weeks, but at least that's what you can do at the time.
Yep.
And that goes in good stead as well. It shows on your ledger what you're paying, and it shows that part payment building up over time because, just everything now, and even before the cost of living was an issue, we all had things that popped up from time to time.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. I think now's a really awesome time for us to just take a little bit of a break, but we'll be back super soon to have a bit more of a chat about just the state of the rental market.
Awesome.
All right, see you in a sec. So we are back. We just had a little break. So I wanted to dive back into what we were talking about a bit earlier, just about, from what we said right at the very start, just about how things are really tricky at the moment, so-called housing crisis.
Yep.
I guess tenants, I think, would be really interested in knowing about how they can actually be competitive when there isn't, many spots.
Yeah, of course.
I know a lot of tenants are being turned away and they're really struggling. My brother's going through that at the moment. They're trying to find a place near the city, which is a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
They're getting turned away. And they're fairly good, as far as I'm aware, at least when it comes to their rent roll, and not rent roll, sorry, they're, paying rent and things like that.
Yep.
So many words for me, I just use them. How can tenants actually be competitive?
I think the really important thing is when you apply is making sure that you have all of the correct documentation and up to date. So there are some changes in legislation that will be coming in about an application that is standard that everybody uses, because at the moment so many different ways you can apply via digital means. They ask for all different things. Each agency is slightly different. But I think if you provide, making sure you've got all of your contact details are correct, your email address is correct, your mobile number's correct, you have to put down next of kin or emergency contact. You also have to put in personal references, your employer's details. Any people that you put into your application, make sure they know that they are going to be contacted, whether it's digitally, via email or via a text message. They need to respond to that pretty quickly for you to be in any kind of running for any property, because the quicker we get those responses back, the quicker we put an application to an owner, like an overview of your application. So if there is issues with that, if we don't hear back, then unfortunately you may miss out on being put in an overview to an owner.
May I actually interrupt you to ask a question about that? Sorry to interrupt though. A friend of mine actually is also searching. Everyone's searching.
Yeah.
And she texted me the other week and was like, "Can you be a reference for my rental application?" I'm
Yes.
like, "Absolutely, of course I can."
Yeah.
And then she let me know just today. We didn't make that property. We didn't get in. But nobody actually contacted me. So is there things that property managers will see and just kind of stop their application there and not check any references? or
No,
anything like that?
I can't speak for all property managers because everybody
course,
does
yeah.
things differently. But for me, if there's an application, as soon as it comes in or thereabouts, I'll look at it. And depending on how their system is set up, it will automatically send out any references.
Okay.
Personal references are a little bit tricky because they're your friends. They're always going to say glowing things about you.
That's our job.
Yeah. So you may not be the most cleanest person, but we're going to say you're amazing. She's an amazing person. Always takes pride. Like, you're going to hype up your mate.
Of course.
So personal references don't necessarily hold a lot of bearing. They do if it comes back negatively. It's like, whoa. So that's why it's really important that you make sure you put people down that are going to support you. Not
Imagine putting someone that you don't know if they're going to say something nice. That's, anyway.
It does happen from time to time.
Yeah, it's surprising.
But, and those ones are like, woo, it's a little bit of drama.
A little bit,
whoa,
right?
what's going on there? And I have so many questions. But it's really, really important, depending on the system that each agency has. For me, my system doesn't automatically necessarily send those things off. Sometimes too, within your profile, if you have a profile, say within To Apply, it will store that information so it's already there. So when you apply,
Okay.
it comes across with those references already completed. If the person who provides that reference ticks a certain little box to say, hold it in their profile, in layman's terms. But I suppose the other one is like really important that you have the correct email address for your current agency. Be upfront with why you left, the reason why you're leaving that. If it's a rent increase, say that. If it's the owner's moving back in, say that. If it's a notice to leave because of something that happened during your tenancy or a notice to remedy breach which leads to a notice to leave, put that down. Because if I get something different from an agency to what you've put down as a reason,
Yep.
that's a little red flag for me of
Yep.
I need to talk to you about your reasoning to why you're leaving.
Yep.
If there's issues with your previous tenancy, I want to know so then I can let the owner know that
Yep.
they're perhaps inheriting a risk.
Yep.
And if we can avoid it, we will. Obviously, like we like to give people the benefit of the doubt because not all agencies are created equal. Not all property managers are the same. So it may be that you've had a property manager who's got a vendetta against you for some reason and they make your life difficult. There are property managers out there, unfortunately, but I kind of want to know all of that information. So then my owner can make a decision with all of the information in front of them.
Yep. I suppose in that case too, if you can't change what's happened,
Oh, yeah.
obviously,
Own it.
then that accountability could
Yeah.
be the thing that makes that difference.
Definitely.
Because lying about it or being secretive isn't going to change that it happened.
Yeah.
It's the only thing it's going to do is make you as the property manager feel like they are trying to be
Yes, manipulative or being
and then that
secretive.
hurts you so much more than
does.
being accountable. So I guess that's really just the big tick, right? Is if you have an issue, be accountable because that's your only chance,
Correct.
essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, treat those how you want to be treated. So I know sometimes, yes, there's some tough situations that you go through and yes, it can follow you. But if you own that and go, look, I mucked up, I was in a bad relationship, or I got complaints about my dog, I don't have that dog anymore, but that's why I was given a notice to leave at that property.
Yep.
Tell me, because it puts you in good stead. The owner wants to know that stuff as well, because ultimately you're moving into their property, their investment, which could be worth, $500,000 or up to $1 million. They want to know this stuff.
Yep.
Because it's a massive risk to put someone in there. And two, applications, we have to go on what's on paper or how the discussions have gone on the phone. So there are little things that we look at, especially, like I say, this is probably a pet peeve of mine, is on realestate.com. It says, I now understand that not everybody reads everything on realestate.com. They just look at the pretty pictures
Of course.
and how much rent it is per week.
Yes.
But then they send me an inquiry of when is it available, an application, a link to an application, and when is there an inspection. Now, on the bios for those properties, it says we don't have any inspections booked. This is the price per week, and you have to go to this website to apply. So for me, if I see that, it's like, oh, you didn't read down further enough. And
It's like on a job application,
Yeah.
almost, hey, because I've seen often on Seek, they'll put in like, you have to read to the bottom to see it, but it'll say the only way to apply is if you email this person
Yes.
whose name is this.
yes, and this is their email address.
Don't apply through Seek.
Yes,
And so obviously immediately if you apply through Seek, you didn't read it.
Correct.
And they can cut you out.
Correct.
So similar thing.
Yeah. So that I see their application come through, and it's like, oh, but you didn't read. So then for me, it kind of preempts what they may be like during their tenancy. And I know that sounds horrible, but over 2 decades in the industry,
Yep.
I've seen some things.
And if we're talking about how to make yourself competitive.
That's right. Be attentive.
You've got the drive to try and do your best.
Yeah.
This is how you do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Be attentive, read the whole thing. If you've got 6 dogs and it's an apartment, it's probably not going to suit you, so don't apply.
Yeah.
So really, look at properties with intent. Is it really going to suit your needs? If you've got 6 children and it's a 2-bedroom house, again, probably not going to work out because that's way too many bodies. I understand affordability is an issue there, but read it, understand it, think about it.
Yep.
Is it really suiting your needs? Yes, fantastic. Go to what it says in the ad to do.
Yep. I suppose this would cut out a lot of those tenants who are sort of like, I'm panicking, I don't know,
Yes.
I'm getting in nowhere, I'm just going to apply.
Yep.
Quantity over quality.
That's right.
And they'll think, well, at least one of them I must get one of them just because of numbers.
Yes.
But that, I suppose, that really goes against that idea because no, actually, the more effort you put in, the more thought you put in, it's probably more likely you're actually going to get
It's applying for properties with intent.
Yeah.
It's kind of like in the dating world. You date with intent. I mean, not everybody does, each to their own. But
Don't just swipe
on
every single person.
Don't just apply for everything thinking, oh, yeah, like you said, surely out of one of those I'll get it. Because for us, time for me is a currency. So I like to invest time in the applications to make sure I've got all the information for my owner. And then if I come to you and say, look, you've been approved for this property, and you go, oh, nah, it's not actually, I don't like that one. Why did you apply?
Well, they answer and they're like, what property? Where are you from?
Yeah.
What's this?
Yeah, well, I understand because of the way the market is that there's a lot of applications. People are applying with lots of agencies with lots of properties. And that question I can understand.
That's not too bad, that one.
No, that one's okay. Because just, hi, it's Elizabeth from Parkstone Property. Oh, yeah, which property? Because you've applied for so many.
True.
It's, but when I've processed your application, so any application can be anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours, depending on the level of information that's in there. And if you say to me, oh, no, we don't actually like that property, I'm going to look at your application a little bit with hesitation for the next one I see you apply for. It's like, have you looked at that property? Do you know that this property is what it is? Or have you just done that random, swipe? Yeah, applying for everything because you're increasing your strike rate as such. So definitely make sure all of the information is there, including up-to-date pay slips. If you're moving for a new job, put in your work contract or the letter of offer, which summarises your work contract. Okay. If there's nothing on there, I have nothing to go on. I can't determine then if this is legit. And I can't determine what your wage is going to be in gross or net terms. So then I don't know if you can afford it because you input a particular amount in the application process. That's got to be confirmed by your employer. So if you put down a crazy amount and your employer comes back and it's 50 to 60 grand less, a little red flag, you don't actually know what you're going to be earning. So are you going to be able to be across your budgeting? Are you going to be able to pay your rent on time? Little things that, yes, I'm probably a little bit judgmental in that sense. But like I've said, 2 decades in the industry, I've seen some things.
Yep.
So, yes, I have this, maybe a checklist that I go through with each application that it's you want to put your best foot forward. You want to look great on paper. If you get a prompt to say more information required, ring me or ring the agency so that you can get on top of it straight away because the longer you leave it, that means you've got a lesser chance of being included in an overview, which means you're going to miss out. Yep. And that's going to be something with any application you put in. If you keep... You don't necessarily get a reason for why you're unsuccessful, but that's an onus. That's for you to find out. Most agencies won't give you a reason, especially if it's just you're in competition with other people. They'll give you that reason. Yep. But if there's something in particular wrong with it, depending what it is, they may not tell you. If you have applied for a property with me and there are rent arrears, I'm going to tell you because you're paying it and you are responsible for that.
Yep.
You need to be on top of the receipts that come through to make sure that you're paying in front. And I get it, everyone is busy and you probably get 1,000 emails in a week. And I know for me, sometimes the last thing I want to do is check my Gmail account with all of the spam and everything. Yep. But as an adult, it is our responsibility to be accountable for anything that we have to pay for. So it's as simple as, pay for your mobile phone bill. If you don't pay it, it'll get cut off. So, making sure all of the information is correct on your application. If you have pets, put photos, put that they're desexed or, registered in that particular area, and a little bio about your animal. especially about your kids too. If you've got, I suppose too,
Little bio about your kids in a little
yeah,
picture.
no, but like that resonates. Even
does,
if you
you're
provide, you can provide extra information, or you can just provide the bare minimum. Either way, it doesn't really matter. But if you put a little bit more effort into your application, it really shows on my end when I'm processing it, because then I can give, the more information I can give an owner, the more they may resonate towards your application, because they understand your plight of totally relocating your family to a new area for a new opportunity, and the owner may want to give you a chance. It's because they've been through that themselves.
Yep.
So definitely, make sure you put as much information in there, have that accountability if you know there's some issues there, and then that will prompt the agency to call you to discuss that, hopefully.
Yeah.
But if they don't, then that's on the agency. You just have to be patient, especially the bigger agencies that have got big rent rolls. They don't necessarily have the time to commit to something like I do. But
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess overall, would you sort of agree that, from your perspective, when you're looking through, rifling through all these different tenants, would you kind of make your decision quite majorly about depending on whether or not they're really appropriate for the property? Is that kind of the major driver, or is it a lot to do with rental arrears? I mean, I guess I know it all combines.
Yeah.
But is there anything you see that's just like straight away?
I suppose it comes down to what that property is. And so, you're not going to put a couple with a 1-year-old in a townhouse that has stairs that are like there's a massive gap between the treads, because that's just a recipe for disaster. There is a level of that goes into it, but there's also a level of affordability. So we have, through To Apply, we can see on our end the amount of money that you put in as what you earn as your gross wage.
Yeah.
If there's 2 or 3 people, it will combine it and then say, this is the percentage, the affordability percentage that they accumulate. So we look at 30% is our cutoff. If your affordability percentage is, say, 40% on your combined incomes, you're not going to be able to afford the property. It's too high. That's basically saying if something happened, let's say your car broke down, there's a very good chance you wouldn't be able to afford the rent that week, because you've got so much, your income is so low compared to what the rent is per week.
There's not really a big safety net.
Yeah, that's right. So say, for example, if the rent's $600 a week and you earn $1,000, might be a little bit too hard.
Yeah.
Because you've only got a buffer of that $400 to live, pay for your fuel, your mobile phone, all of those other costs that you have. It's probably a no. But at the end of the day, not my choice. I put all of that to the owner and say, this is what their affordability percentage is. Right. And then the owner makes the decision from there. But the higher the affordability percentage, the lesser chance you're going to have. So sometimes we are noticing as well, a lot of people are applying and they're mates, so there's 3 or 4 mates moving in together, because the affordability then becomes better, because each individual wage on their own can't afford it, but 4 of them together, it makes it more affordable.
Okay. Would that be 4 mates in like a 2-bedroom or something like that? So they share a room type thing? Would that come into consideration? Because I assume you wouldn't let someone just sleep on the couch and pay rent.
No.
So how would you look at that in terms of how many roommates you can have?
Yeah, in that instance, if there's no romantic attachments there, it doesn't even come down to that. It's more, that's 4 bodies in a 2-bedroom apartment. That's extra wear and tear compared to, say, 2 people. So you're looking at that on the long-term scale. It'll probably mean that the property needs more upkeep, and it's probably not the most appropriate.
Right.
If we tend to get applications like that on homes, on houses that maybe are 4 bedrooms, each person can have a bedroom. That, not so much of a big deal. It's just whether the owner is prepared to have 4 individuals, because with that, as much as I understand that they want to try and get into the rental market and start, or, they have to move out from where they are, just sharing is easier. That's a lot more paperwork for us. And it's a lot more paperwork in some ways for those that are living together, because we only accept rent from one of those people.
Yes.
So they're responsible for that. And then if somebody moves out, it's a whole different story with admin. And yes, so we look at that. We kind of look in the future and say, well, okay, that's awesome that they want to move in together. But if somebody has a falling out and two of them move out, can those two actually afford the rent on their own? Or will they be wanting to bring in another two people to replace them? Which means, yes, there's extra paperwork associated with that. It's not as cut and dried as, say, a family that moves in.
Yeah.
Or if there's, separation, that's pretty straightforward. But if it's a family, society puts that as it's a much more stable environment, which is not always the case. But it's just if you've got 4 people and then you've got a family, the owner may go for a family because it's less wear and tear than 4 people that are coming and going. 4 people can generally mean 2 partners. So then there's 8 people in the property as well. So it opens up a whole can of worms.
I mean, I suppose as somebody who, when I was 19, tried to book a cruise holiday with 5 of my friends and ended up going with just me and my partner only at like the last minute. Yeah. That's kind of fair. Like I sort of can see and understand from an owner's point of view that they can be like that.
Correct.
I sort of get that.
Yeah.
Something that I did when I moved out was I brought on my friend to live with us, but I did it as an approved applicant rather than on the lease.
Yes.
Is that something that's a little bit different? So you would approve the lease first and then approve applicants?
Well, it does depend. So if you're wanting to be an approved occupant, you have no rights.
Yeah.
It's just the owner gives you permission to be there.
Yeah.
So I can't give you a rental reference for an approved occupant. I can say, yes, they've lived there, but I can't say whether the rent's been on time or anything like that because they're not technically a full-blown tenant.
Yeah.
In that instance, if you know that there's going to be somebody that's going to be an approved occupant, be upfront, be accountable for that. Because if I turn up and do a routine and you've got another person in another bedroom, I'm going to be asking questions.
Yes.
The owner's going to see that on the inspection that I send to them.
Yep.
They're going to wonder, well, they're actually technically subletting, which is illegal in your general tenancy agreement. If you exchange or if they contribute towards groceries or they actually physically give you money, that is subletting according to your general tenancy agreement, which is a grounds for breach, a notice to remedy breach. You've got to get rid of that person. So there are pros and cons with being an approved occupant. It's better off to be a tenant because you then are responsible. But then as a tenant, if things go poo, you're then still responsible as well, which means your name could get dragged through something if things do go south. The one thing that I would recommend if you are in a situation where your mates are wanting to all move in together, have those conversations about money because money discussions change people, especially when it comes to potentially losing a house because somebody's not paying the rent. It fractures friendships and relationships.
Yep.
And I always say don't rent with friends or with family because it's really, really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was pretty lucky I didn't lose that friendship. But he was very I don't know. He was a type of person who was very non-confrontational, so I guess I got lucky. But I suppose we also thought about that before we let somebody move in with us. So,
and it's different too because you're sharing a space with somebody else, and if you've never lived together or never moved out of home, suddenly there's all these different roles of what happens in the fridge? Everybody's got a shelf in the fridge.
Yep.
Don't touch anybody's food on the other shelves. You have got your one fridge. But then how do you split the electricity bill and who pays it ultimately and then you pay them back?
Yep.
It's just a whole can of worms when it comes to something like that, and it can cause friction if you don't talk about all of those things beforehand.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day too, that's not up to us as a real estate to manage your budget between the 4 of you or whoever you're living with. That's something you have to work out together.
Yep.
We're not your parents. We can guide you with things related to the property and with maintenance. We can't tell you who does what.
Yeah.
That's up to you guys as adults to work that out.
Yeah.
But ultimately, as a property manager, we only want one person to pay the whole week's rent.
Yeah.
We don't like receiving, you one tenant who pays $120 a week because they've got the ensuite and the main bedroom, and the other people all pay $80. No, we just want one figure per week, one person paying the full rent per week, because then we know the rent's paid and you guys can work all of that out in the background.
Yeah. And I guess it would be so much extra confusing, like we were saying before, just keeping track of your regular rent can be really confusing.
Yeah.
So to add that complication
extra people,
I feel like, and the way my brain works, I would not be able to keep track of that ever.
There were cases in the past where I've had, four blokes living together and they were paying each individual portion to the trust account. They weren't paying on the same day. So there was part payments that were showing on their ledger, and I had to physically go through that ledger and highlight who paid what and when to try and work out, okay, tenant B owes 2 weeks of his portion because he hasn't paid for 2 weeks, but tenant A is fine because he's paid everything, and it's time that I don't need to spend. So I learnt from that experience.
Yes.
It's that one rent payment per week.
Yep.
Sort out your own budgeting together.
And I suppose coming back to this as well, that would be another way to be competitive, is if you are really wanting to do a share house arrangement, come up front and say, we have this plan of how we're going to split it our way. We'll pay you one payment.
Yep.
You won't see any difference.
If I received that on an application, I would be so thankful, because then I can say to the owner, these guys have really thought about this. It's not just been an off the cuff or a weekend conversation. They've actually worked it out of how the breakdown is going to be. That then shows intent, and it shows commitment to making it work. And to an owner, that's a major green flag. Thinking about how it will all work. These two people are going to be approved occupants, or we're all going to go on the bond, we're all going to go on the tenancy agreement, we're all going to be 100% tenants. That shows commitment, which an owner looks for as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our first episode. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. Hopefully we'll be able to get down and do this more in the future.
Yeah.
We're in Brisbane at the moment, but you're from Mackay, so we have to find ways that we can sit down together. But I don't know, I think it's really valuable, and I definitely learn a lot, and I can't wait to have more episodes and just learn more about the property market, about, living, everything. So thank you so much, and we'll both talk to you guys in the next episode.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I wish I knew.
This episode of Parkstone at Home was recorded on Gubby Gubby land, and we'd like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging.